The Joe Rogan Experience.
Like, that's been solved.
No, there's a lot. You know, I'm into the geopolitical and domestic policy shit.
Yeah.
Right? That's where I was drawn more about what's really going on, you know, behind the news, all that sort of stuff. This is bullshit. And I was lucky to train a lot of law enforcement and then military, high-level military, and get connected to intel guys who go, Pat, we need to talk. Like, no, you're completely off. Let me explain things to you, right? It was like,
as far as, like, what were you completely off about?
Well, I can tell you what I was right about when I called up my buddy and I go, hey, 4 years ago, whatever it was, 4.5 years ago, I go, we're funding ISIS, aren't we? He goes, oh, yeah. NATO's the go-between guy. What do you think? Al-Nusra, ISIS, friggin' Al-Shabaab, what do you fucking think?
So why do they fund ISIS?
To take out Syria. It was obvious, right? The Mujahideen in Afghanistan was to friggin' take out the Russians. But the way I looked at it was, when that was going on, funding the Mujahideen was to bankrupt Russia, right?
Right.
We wanted them to go bankrupt, and it worked. Reagan was a genius in that part. The diabolical part, of course, is Russia and America both fighting over the resources of Afghanistan.
Right.
But ISIS was just, that's some weird shit. When you have a 50,000-man army just appear out of nowhere with professional cameramen and editors and producers and directors making the high-level films that they were putting out, where it's every 3 seconds they're cutting different angles, professionally put together films of people being burned, I go, this is too weird. This is too weird.
You know what people stopped talking about? Do you remember when they blamed Benghazi on some bullshit
video
movie? Yeah, some video that someone made.
Right.
Was it like the Tears of Muslims or something like that? Or I forget that.
Nobody even knew it existed.
Nobody knew it existed.
Yeah.
And everybody knew it was bullshit.
Right.
And they were pushing that as a narrative. Like, this is what was the motivation behind. And everybody was like, what?
Have you had Peranto on your show?
No. Who's that?
Peranto's
What's his name?
Former
name?
SEAL.
What's his name?
Peranto.
That's his whole name?
P-O-R-O-N-T-A.
Was he like
His last
Roseanne?
name's Peranto.
Oh.
But I think he's a former SEAL. There were several SEALs, obviously, that ran to try and help the ambassador and some of the other guys. Peranto lived through it. But, you know, when he talks about it, they're moving massive amounts of weapons through Libya, into Syria, into other places in the Middle East, right? It's just a fact that it's happening. And that whole thing going down, I think, was a way for them to just cover it all up and remove and erase any people that knew about it. You know what I'm saying? That's the way it spells out to me pretty obvious, because it's documented. It's all documented that weapons were being moved. And if you look at arsenal weapons manufacturing in Bulgaria, so Diliana Gotenshaiva, who I had on my podcast, The Conspiracy Farm, right? She was the Bulgarian reporter that got fired for...
I didn't know you had a podcast.
Yeah, it's called The Conspiracy Farm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I want to Google it.
We don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. But I've got
I like the name.
Yeah, my co-host Jeffrey Wilson, he's a really bright guy. Cool,
it's a great
cool
name.
Yeah, so we have fun with it.
T-shirts? Can I wear a Conspiracy Farm
Dude, I was going to bring you one, and he couldn't ship me one. So I will.
That's all right.
I will.
Okay, I'll wear one.
So it's a barn
Shout
with
out to CT Fletcher.
It's a barn with a satellite and a satellite dish down next to the barn.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So that's it, right?
And are you doing it out of Iowa?
Oh yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, yeah, it is, right? But Arsenal Weapons Manufacturing, she exposed the ISIS fighters, took her to their weapons caches, and there was massive amounts of artillery rounds, depleted uranium stuff, small arms stuff, and it was all Arsenal weapons, Bulgarian weapons, right? And she got fired for exposing it. Now, at the same time, Silkway Airlines, who is a Azerbaijani airline, their manifests got exposed by Bulgarian Anonymous with manifests of all the white phosphorus weapons, the depleted uranium, artillery rounds, all these shipments, massive shipments, going into Turkey, going into Libya, going into the Ukraine, right? Where a bunch of shit was going down there. And every one of those places, who showed up to broker the deals? John McCain.
Whoa.
John McCain, right? And look, we can't prove it, but there's people telling me that potentially there's an offshore company that owns a big percentage of arsenal weapons manufacturing in Bulgaria, right? So that's the kind of stuff I'm going in. I'm into. Who's causing it? Why are they causing it? The truth. I'm just a truth seeker, right? Which you seem like that kind of guy.
For sure. Don't you think that stuff is exposed at a level that's never been possible before because of the internet.
Yeah, yeah.
And that these people are probably used to operating in a certain way that they've been doing for decades, and now they're having to adjust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
and people like you just doing these podcasts and talking about it, which opens the minds of other people and has them thinking about it.
Who are the people screaming the most? And I wasn't even a Trump supporter, right? I'm a Rand Paul guy. You got a fucking Rand Paul shirt on.
Right.
I was a Ron Paul guy.
You got to teach them takedown defense.
Off of a lawnmower, right?
Well, he got blindsided in his defense, right?
Yeah, but
what the fuck was that about? His neighbor attacked him?
His neighbor's a lunatic.
Oh,
right?
Great. Good times.
But
it's a risky thing to do. Live right next to a guy and attack him.
Right.
Like you're fucking burning the bridge.
I don't know what kind of sentence that guy got though. I haven't kept up on that. But I was given
sentence yet.
During the presidential run. I was given speeches for Rand Paul, a couple of them, to introduce him. So I'd give a speech, then bring him out, and I got to know him a little bit better.
Is this in Iowa?
Yeah, yeah. Amazing dude. We had great conversations.
I'm a big fan of his dad.
Yeah, yeah. So, but the people that are yelling the most now about Trump and all the other stuff, you wonder what they're guilty of, right? The deep state is just, it is a way of doing business, right? There's smash and grab. There's pay to play. Smash and grab is me as somebody who's very powerful in government going after an industry, crushing it, ruining its stock, and then my buddies buy the company, right? When the stock collapses and then bringing it back up, like the GI Bill for University of Memphis. We go after it. No longer will there be any GI Bill money put toward that. The stock goes from $100 down to $3. Obama's buddy goes in, buys it. Then they go, we're going to allow GI money to go back into it now. Stock goes back up, right? That's the kind of shit that's going on. It's some bad stuff. And we just do our best to follow it, educate people. And we have a lot of people who say you're a nut. You're wearing a tinfoil hat.
What were you just talking about, Jamie, about something that you'd seen about politicians being exempt from insider trading rules?
Someone on Twitter, I'll find the name later, but if this guy, he told me about this guy. His name's Peter Schweizer. He's a Stanford professor.
Secret Empires. That's the book.
He wrote this
That's
book.
the book you want to. He wrote Clinton Cash also.
Yeah, there's another book that he hit me up to about. Yeah, but this is the one that he just.
Have
wrote.
you had him on your show?
No, I have not.
That's a guy to have on your show.
Okay, I would
man.
love to have him on.
Yeah.
How the American political class hides corruption and enriches family and friends.
It's
Without
insane.
a doubt, that shit's real.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, that shit's going on. I mean, look, we were just talking about this recently about how half of what it is to be president is to get yourself into a position where after you're out, you can make these crazy speeches for these bankers. Like,
Right.
why is that? Like, I mean, it's almost like a
Man, I tell you what,
policy.
there was a time when a good friend of mine who was an agent for me at the time got me involved because of all the years in MMA and martial arts. I'd met people from all over the world who had eventually moved into positions of power in government or cities or this or that. And so they said, we want you to help us get our foot in the door to sell waste to energy projects. So it was basically a facility that burns anything garbage. I mean, you can burn tires in the thing at low oxygen levels, so the emissions are very low, but it generates electricity, right? And in Europe, it was everybody from the city, province, that country, and the European Union. Everybody wanted a piece of the projects, right? That's just the way they do business in Europe and South America and other places like that. They have to have a different model for it here, for the corruption, right? They just do things differently here, and that's just the way it is. They've made adjustments, and either way, they're going to find their way around it.
Yeah, the idea that there's no corruption is ridiculous, right? No one thinks that. So it's how much corruption is there, and how many people are out there exposing it and putting their neck out there to expose it. That's a big part of the problem, because if you really know about it, that means you're probably entrenched in the system too.
Yeah, and the cognitive dissonance of the citizenry of knowing that Hillary Clinton and a few other people sold, the document just came out. It was 15 million kilograms. 15 million kilograms of depleted uranium, yellow cake, right? Sold to the Russians. At what point in any part of a discussion on any planet is it okay to sell your enemy 15 million kilograms of friggin' uranium?
What was the justification behind it? Have they agreed that this is a fact? And this is
it's a fact. It's a
fact. They
fact.
agreed? I mean, is there any dispute that this is a fact?
No, there is no. But they sit there and use the excuse. Well, there was 8 other people that had to sign off on this. right?
What does that mean?
Right, but
eight other people also got paid?
suddenly
Only
that
eight
company
people?
suddenly that company invests $145 million in the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, that's a big problem. That Clinton Foundation is fucking insane, and all these people that were blind supporters of Hillary that didn't look at that. Like, how do you not find a giant problem with that?
Right, right. And that book by Schweitzer talks about it. He goes in detail about that stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure. How's
He's
that
a
guy
bright.
staying
I'm
alive?
surprised. That's what I was just
Yeah.
going to say. After the
Because he's
Clinton
not going
cash,
after the Russians.
dude, Clinton cash was bad enough. This one's
Yeah.
even worse. I'm surprised he's not dead.
I wonder how many people are actually reading it. You know, I feel like they think that there's always going to be a certain amount of that stuff out there, and they just tolerate it, and they just, as long as it's not really fucking up their business, because it's not. The politicians are still allowing it.
Right.
Law enforcement's still allowing it. No one's really going after them. It makes you wonder, like, if Hillary had actually gotten into the White House and she faced the same scrutiny that Trump is facing right now over the Russian probe.
Which we know none of this would be uncovered had she won.
Right.
Right?
Right.
We know that.
Right. Yeah.
All of this stuff would have been swept under the rug.
Yeah, most likely.
All this stuff with McCabe and Strzok and Page and Comey and all these people of going out of their way to try and derail Trump to get these FISA court friggin' surveillance friggin' warrants to spy on a president-elect and then a sitting president? Are you kidding me? At what point are people not charged with treason for that, right? When they were doing this spying before he ever won the presidency. Don't you think that if he was doing something wrong with the Russians, they would have friggin' made it mainstream news and busted him for it?
Yeah, there's for sure some dummies in his staff that made some inappropriate meetings and had some. I mean, they definitely had some intentions.
Well,
but if they had something on him,
The way I look at it is this. I mean, if you win the presidency, I'm going to send whoever is underneath me. If I'm the president, we have to have meetings with diplomats from other countries to make the transition. That's part of the deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really is. That goes on. That's just the way it is.
right? But that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about before the presidency. They're talking about having meetings with Russians long before,
Right.
Where they'd planned this whole thing out. Look,
They got nothing.
They're all dirty.
They got nothing. I mean,
If they had something, it would be out there. You know,
it's that projection and diversion and everything else because the Podestas were doing lobbying for the biggest friggin' Russian bank in the world,
Right.
in Washington D.C. That never comes up.